She barely knew the man whose child she was carrying. She knew his name, but almost nothing about him. That was the first thing Amara thought when the test showed two lines, two sharp, unforgiving lines that split her entire life into before and after. Before that night at the Versailles Hotel, after Kim Jae-hyun. She sat on the cold bathroom floor of her Lagos apartment, back pressed against the tub, test clutched in both hands like it might change its mind if she stared long enough. The tap was dripping. Somewhere outside, a generator was humming. Life was happening normally out there. Traffic, noise, Okada horns. While inside this bathroom, everything had gone completely, catastrophically still. She whispered it to no one. No, 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 no. But the lines didn't move. 6 weeks earlier, Amara Osei had been exactly where she was supposed to be. She was the events coordinator for the Grand Meridian Hotel, one of the most prestigious hospitality brands in Lagos. 28 years old, Ghanaian Nigerian by blood, fiercely competent, and the kind of woman who color-coded her calendar 2 months in advance. She wore her natural hair in a high puff on weekdays and pressed it silk straight for events. She had a 5-year plan. She had savings. She had rules. Rule number 1, never get emotionally attached to guests. Rule number 2, never, under any circumstances, blur the line between professional and personal. She had followed those rules for 4 years without a single stumble. And then the Versailles penthouse suite was booked for 3 nights under the name Kim Enterprises, and everything she had so carefully built inside herself started to crack. She had seen powerful men before. Lagos was full of them. Men who wore authority like cologne, heavy and everywhere. But when Kim Jae-hyun walked through those hotel doors on a Thursday evening in April, flanked by 4 men who moved like shadows and spoke to no one, Amara felt something she had no category for. He was tall. Not remarkably so, but the way he carried himself made the room feel smaller. His suit was charcoal gray, impeccably cut, no tie. His jaw was sharp, his eyes darker than she expected. Not cold exactly, but carefully controlled. Like a man who had decided long ago that whatever he felt, he would never let it be seen first. He stopped at the front desk. His eyes swept the lobby once, twice, the quick automatic scan of someone trained to assess threats, and then landed on Amara, who was standing near the concierge station reviewing a seating arrangement for Friday's gala. She didn't look away fast enough. He held the eye contact for exactly 3 seconds. Then the corner of his mouth moved. Barely, barely. And he looked back at the front desk clerk. Amara exhaled. Professional, she reminded herself. He is a guest. She did not know then that he had already asked about her, that his head of security, a man who moved like shadows named Park Sung-jin, had quietly approached the GM within the first hour and asked, "The woman with the clipboard near concierge, who is she?" She did not know that Jae-hyun had been watching Lagos for months, that this wasn't just a business trip, it was a pivot, a test run for something enormous, and that he had arrived in this city exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the flight. She did not know any of this. What she knew was that by Friday evening, during the gala she had spent 3 weeks planning, he appeared at her elbow without warning and said, in perfect accented English, "You run this like you built the building yourself." She turned. He was closer than she expected. She could smell sandalwood and something colder underneath. Iron, maybe, or restraint. "I'm just doing my job," she said. "No." He looked at her directly. "You're doing everyone else's job and making it look like your own. There's a difference." She blinked. He picked up a glass of champagne from a passing tray, tilted his head slightly, and said, "Kim Jae-hyun," like an offering. She hesitated exactly 1 second too long. "Amara Osei." He nodded, drank, looked out at the room she had built from nothing but spreadsheets and phone calls and stubbornness, and then he said quietly, almost to himself, "You make things beautiful." He walked away before she could respond. She stood there, heart doing something completely unprofessional, and told herself it meant nothing. It meant nothing. That's what she kept saying over the next 2 days as he materialized near her. Not in a pursuing way, not in the aggressive, entitled way of the wealthy men she occasionally had to manage with a professional smile and a polite redirect. He appeared the way weather does, naturally, inevitably, like she wasn't in any danger until she was already soaked. He asked questions that weren't small talk. He listened the way most people don't, fully, without preparing his next sentence while she was still speaking. He laughed once. Really laughed, unexpected and brief, when she described a previous gala disaster involving a collapsing ice sculpture and a senator's wife. And that laugh undid something in her chest she had kept very carefully tied shut. She didn't ask what he did. The security detail was answer enough. He didn't volunteer it. On his last night, there was a private dinner for his business associates on the rooftop. After it ended, after the last guest had retired and the staff had cleared down, Amara was on the rooftop alone, finally breathing, shoes in her hand, watching Lagos glitter below. She didn't hear him come up behind her. She should have. She later decided she must have known, on some animal level, that he was there. That she had chosen not to move. That some part of her had already made a decision she hadn't consciously agreed to yet. "You shouldn't be up here alone," he said. "I'm never alone," she replied. "Lagos is always awake." He stood beside her. They looked out together. Below them, the city pulsed and hummed and breathed. "I leave tomorrow," he said. "I know." She had his checkout in her system. "I don't usually—" He stopped. Started again. "This doesn't usually happen." "What doesn't?" He turned to look at her. That careful, controlled face. She saw something move behind it, something that didn't have a name yet. "This," he said simply. The city hummed below them. The night was warm and thick with something electric. And Amara Osi, who had rules, who had a 5-year plan, who had never once let a guest pass the professional wall she had built, looked at this man she barely knew and felt the wall come down in one long, quiet exhale. What happened next was not planned. It was not sensible. It was the most real thing she had felt in 4 years. He left the next morning. No note. No number. She hadn't asked. He hadn't offered. They had both understood, she thought, that it was singular. A city, a night, a moment outside of regular life. Not a beginning, just a perfect, painful thing unto itself. She went back to her color-coded calendar, her 5-year plan, her rules, and 3 weeks later, she was sitting on a bathroom floor staring at 2 lines. Lagos had a way of making the impossible feel normal. But even Lagos wasn't prepared for what happened next. Amara spent 1 full week in a state of controlled paralysis. She went to work. She coordinated 3 events. She ate when she remembered to eat. And every single night she lay awake running calculations that had no good answer. She was not in a relationship. She had no family in Lagos. Her mother was in Accra, her father long gone. She had a job she loved and could not afford to lose. She had no contact information for the father. She wasn't even completely sure she remembered his last name clearly enough to Google. Kim was everywhere. She told herself she would make a decision calmly and rationally, like the practical woman she was. Instead, she typed Kim Jae-hyun Lagos business into a search bar at midnight on a Tuesday. And the results made her go very, very cold. The first article was from a Korean financial news outlet and had been translated imperfectly by her browser. But the photograph was clear enough. Him, sharper in print, surrounded by men in suits, stepping out of a building in Seoul. The headline read, Kim Enterprises expands West African operations. CEO Kim Jae-hyun targets Lagos. She scrolled. The second result was from an investigative blog, the kind that lived in the gray space between journalism and rumor. The headline was blunter: Kim Jae-hyun, the ghost behind Korea's most dangerous business empire. She should have stopped reading. She didn't. The article was careful. Everything couched in allegation, nothing confirmed. But the picture it painted was comprehensive. Kim Jae-hyun, 41 years old, heir to a dynasty that had started in legitimate shipping and expanded into territory that legitimate shipping had no business touching. Connections to the Busan underworld never proven. 3 government investigations, all dropped. Associates who had a documented tendency to disappear from public life when they became inconvenient. Not a businessman, or rather, not only a businessman. Amara closed the laptop, opened it again, closed it. She pressed her hands flat on her kitchen table and focused on breathing. Okay, she thought. Okay. He doesn't know. You never have to tell him. You can do this alone. You have done everything alone. She believed this, completely and totally, for exactly 9 days. And then Kim Jae-hyun walked back into the Grand Meridian Hotel. She saw him from across the lobby and her entire body went offline. He hadn't checked in. He'd simply appeared, him and his shadow men, moving through the lobby with that same contained, weather-like certainty. And this time, he was looking for something. She could see it in the set of his jaw, the slight tension in his neck. He was looking for her. Their eyes met across 30 feet of polished marble. He stopped walking. She stopped breathing. The silence between them lasted approximately 4 seconds before Park Sung-jin appeared at her side, like he'd materialized from the floor, and said quietly, in accented English, "Mr. Kim would like a moment of your time." Mr. Kim, she thought wildly, would like a moment. She thought about running. She thought about being ill. She thought about every practical, reasonable escape route. Then she thought, he doesn't know. He can't know. This is just a coincidence. Business. He's here for business. She followed. They sat in the hotel's private meeting lounge, just the 2 of them, Sung-jin posted outside the door like a wall with a face. Jae-hyun sat across from her, jacket off, sleeves slightly rolled. He looked like he hadn't slept much. He also looked, infuriatingly, exactly as she remembered. "You came back," she said, because she had to say something. "I had business," he said. Then, after a pause, "That's not why I came back." Her heart made a very bad decision. "Mr. Kim," Jae-hyun, I'm not here to pressure you," he said, and his voice was so direct, so absent of the ego she'd been bracing for, that she went quiet. "I know what that night was. I'm not here to rewrite it. I came back because..." He looked down briefly, then back up. "I needed to know if you were all right." Something moved through her, something she couldn't afford. "I'm fine," she said. And then, because the word fine had never felt so catastrophically inadequate, "I'm completely fine." He looked at her for a long moment. He had the eyes of a man who had been lied to professionally for decades. He knew what fine sounded like when it wasn't, but he didn't push. "Good," he said quietly. "Then I'll leave you alone." He stood up, reached the door. And Amara Osi, who had rules and plans and every sensible reason in the world to stay silent, said, "I'm pregnant." The room didn't change. The air didn't shift dramatically. He didn't spin around with wide eyes like a soap opera. He went still. Just still. The kind of stillness that comes before something massive. Then, very slowly, he turned around. She had expected rage, denial, accusation. "How do I know it's mine?" The thing men like him probably said. She had constructed 20 versions of this conversation in her head, and in all of them, she was defending herself. He did not make her defend herself. He walked back across the room and sat down directly in front of her, elbows on his knees, and looked at her with an expression she had no translation for. "How far?" he asked. She blinked. 7 weeks. He nodded, once, processing. "Are you..." He stopped, started differently. What do you want to do? And that question, asked without ownership or ultimatum, nearly destroyed her composure entirely. I don't know yet, she admitted, which was the truest thing she'd said in weeks. He was quiet for a moment. Then, whatever you decide, you're not doing it without support. That's not negotiable. She looked at him sharply. I'm not offering charity. His voice was firm but not unkind. I'm saying that whatever is happening, whatever you decide, I'm not disappearing. I don't do that. She wanted to believe him. She did not yet know how much that would cost her. She should have walked away. She understood this clearly in the logical part of her brain that still functioned normally. The man was, by credible if unproven accounts, connected to something dark and enormous. He lived in Seoul. She lived in Lagos. They had spent one night together. She owed him nothing and he owed her nothing, and the cleanest, safest version of this story ended with her handling the situation alone and never seeing Kim Jae-hyun again. She understood all of this. And then she spent 3 weeks seeing him almost every day. He had extended his Lagos stay, business reasons, officially. But he showed up in her life with a quiet consistency that she didn't know how to fight. Coffee sent to her office, a driver made available without her asking, a simple message each evening, "Do you need anything?" Not romantic, not pressuring, just present. She found herself answering. He told her things she hadn't asked for, about growing up in Busan under a father who ran the world like a war, about inheriting an empire he hadn't entirely chosen, about the weight of a name like Kim in the world he occupied, the expectations it carried, the enemies it accumulated. He told her these things in pieces, slowly, like a man who had forgotten what it felt like to speak without calculating the aftermath. She told him about her mother, about coming to Lagos at 22 with ambitions bigger than her savings, about building something from scratch and choosing not to depend on anyone who might decide to leave. He listened. He always listened, and slowly, without either of them naming it, something built between them that had nothing to do with one night and everything to do with who they actually were. She was 12 weeks pregnant when she told her closest friend, Chinyeri, who responded with such an extravagant sequence of emotions: shock, laughter, worry, excitement, more worry, that Amara spent 20 minutes just waiting for her to finish. "He's a what?" Chinyere said for the third time. "I didn't say that. I said there are articles that suggest..." "Amara, baby, listen to yourself." "I know. Do you? Because you don't look like someone who knows." Amara looked at her hands. "He's kind to me, Chi. Whatever else he is out there in here." She pressed her hand to her chest. "He's kind to me." Chinyere was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's what they all say about the ones you can't leave." The first crack appeared at week 14. A woman arrived in Lagos. Her name was Han Ji-yeon. She was Korean, 35, effortlessly beautiful in the architectural way of women who have been expensive their whole lives. She arrived at the Grand Meridian, of all hotels, with a small entourage of her own, and she asked for Jae-hyun by name at the front desk. Amara heard about it within the hour, because Lagos hotel staff talked, and because the universe had a particular sense of humor. She didn't ask Jae-hyun about it. She told herself she had no right to ask. They were not together. They were two people navigating an accident with unusual grace. That was all. He told her that evening without being asked. "Ji-yeon is here. Han Ji-yeon. I need you to know before you hear it some other way." Amara kept her expression very neutral. "Who is she?" The pause was half a second too long. "We were engaged 7 years ago." The word engaged landed like something dropped from a height. "It ended," he continued, "and it ended badly. She's here because she heard I was in Lagos and she wants..." He seemed to look for the precise word. "A conversation I don't intend to have." "Then tell her that." "I plan to." Jae-hyun. She looked at him directly. If there is something unfinished between you and that woman, you need to be honest with me. I can manage a lot of things. I cannot manage being lied to." He held her gaze. "There is nothing unfinished." She believed him. She was wrong to. Jae-hyun found her 3 days later, not at work. At the pharmacy near Amara's apartment building, a strange coincidental cruelty, except that Amara stopped believing in coincidences around this woman the moment she turned around and found those sharp, beautiful eyes watching her with the particular expression of a woman who has prepared her words in advance. "You're Amara," Jae-hyun said, not a question. Amara's hands tightened on her bag. "I don't think we've met." "No, but I know who you are." Jae-hyun looked her over. Not cruelly exactly, but with the clinical attention of someone taking inventory. "How far along?" she asked, glancing at the pharmacy bag. Amara went cold. "That's not your business. Humor me." Jae-hyun's voice was smooth and even. "Because I need you to understand something about Kim Jae-hyun that he will never tell you himself." "I'm not interested." "He has a son," Jae-hyun said. Amara stopped. The street noise continued. A bus horn, someone arguing, life going on. "In Seoul," Jae-hyun continued, quieter now, almost gentle, which was worse. "He's 6 years old. His name is Jae-hyun. Jae-hyun knows about him, has known for 4 years. She tilted her head. "He chose his empire over that child, over me, and I stayed quiet because I was afraid of what that family would do if I didn't." She paused. "He's not who you think he is." Amara walked away. She didn't stop walking for 6 blocks. She called him. He answered before the second ring. "Are you free right now?" Something in her voice told him enough. "I'm coming." He arrived in 12 minutes. She was sitting at her kitchen table, hands folded, and when he walked through her door, she looked at him with the specific stillness of someone who has put themselves very carefully back together so they don't fall apart while asking a question. "Do you have a son?" He didn't flinch, didn't look away, and in that non-flinch, that steady, unbroken eye contact, she got her answer before he spoke a word. "Yes," he said. She exhaled. A long, fractured thing. "Tell me," she said. "All of it." He sat down across from her. He told her. "Jae-hyun, yes. 6 years old. Born during a period when he and Jae-hyun had been separated but not yet officially ended. Jae-hyun had hidden the pregnancy, had kept it hidden for 2 years out of fear. Fear of his family. Fear of what claiming a child would mean in the world he ran. When he found out, there was a legal agreement. Private support. No public acknowledgement because Jae-hyun hadn't wanted it. Had been terrified that exposure would bring his world to their door. "I send money," he said. "I have since I found out. Jae-hyun's terms were no contact. She was afraid, and I didn't fight it because I understood the fear. I understood what my name costs people who aren't prepared for it." "Does Jae-hyun know who you are?" A pause. "No." Amara looked at the table for a long moment. "So you have a son who doesn't know your name," she said slowly, "and now I'm carrying a baby, and you're here in Lagos being—" Her voice cracked briefly. She repaired it. "Being kind to me, being present. What is this? What are we doing?" "Amara, I need you to be honest with me, not gentle, honest." He leaned forward. His voice, when it came, had something raw in it, something that didn't belong to the controlled, careful man she'd observed from a distance. "I can't undo what I didn't do for Jae-hyun. I carry that. I will carry it until I fix it, and I'm going to fix it." He paused. "But I am not making the same choice twice. I told you I don't disappear. I meant it, whatever it costs." "Jae-hyun, you don't know what it costs yet." "Then I'll find out." She looked at him for a long, unraveling moment. "You scare me," she admitted. The most honest thing she'd said. "I know," he said softly. "You scare me too." Jae-hyun didn't leave Lagos. She stayed, and she maneuvered, and within 2 weeks, Amara began to understand that the woman was not acting alone. Someone was using her. Someone who wanted Jae-hyun destabilized, distracted, who had calculated that a pregnant woman in Lagos was the most efficient lever they could find. That someone was Jae-hyun's older brother, Kim Jae-won, heir apparent by birth order, but not by their father's final choice. The will, their father's, signed 5 years before his death, had split the empire unequally, and Jae-hyun's portion was the larger one, the more powerful one, the one built for whoever could hold it. Jae-won had never forgiven this. He had spent 5 years chipping quietly at the edges of everything Jae-hyun built, and when the Lagos expansion became public, when it became clear that Jae-hyun was about to establish a West African foothold that would make Kim Enterprises entirely too powerful to challenge, Jae-won decided to be less quiet. He had found Ji-yeon, had paid for her trip, had given her information, some true, some shaped, and sent her to Lagos like a missile. Amara found this out not from Jae-hyun, but from Park Sung-jin, who appeared at her office one morning, closed the door, and delivered this information with the flat efficiency of a man completing a security briefing. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because Mr. Kim won't. He doesn't want you pulled into the center of this." "I'm already in the center. I'm carrying his child." Sung-jin nodded. "Which is why you need to understand what's coming." "What is coming?" "Jae-won knows about the pregnancy. He will attempt to use it." The room was very quiet. "Use it how?" she asked, though she already felt the answer in the pit of her stomach. "Leverage, reputation. He will make it public in a way that damages both you and Mr. Kim. He'll frame it as a scandal. A powerful crime family patriarch impregnating a local employee, avoiding responsibility. He has press contacts in Korea and here." "And what does Jae-hyun say about this?" Sung-jin almost looked uncomfortable. "He doesn't know I'm telling you. He's managing the business side. He doesn't want you to feel like a piece on a board. But I am one." "Not to him," Sung-jin said quietly. "That's the problem. You're not a piece to him, and that's exactly what makes you the most effective target." The story hit the internet on a Tuesday, not in Lagos papers, smarter than that. A Korean entertainment news outlet, the kind that blurred the line between celebrity gossip and corporate intelligence. The headline translated roughly to "Kim Jae-hyun's secret, African hotel worker carrying the heir to a criminal empire." It had photographs, her face, from the hotel's publicly accessible staff profiles, his face. The word criminal used 4 times in 7 paragraphs. Her employment history, her neighborhood. Her mother called from Accra within the hour, and that conversation was the hardest thing Amara had ever survived. Not because her mother was cruel, she wasn't, but because the confusion and the fear and the worry in her mother's voice was something Amara had spent her entire life trying to prevent putting there. She sat in Chinyere's apartment that night, phone off, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, while Chinyere made tea and said nothing, which was the most loving thing she could have done. "I can leave," Amara said eventually. "Go back to Accra. Have the baby there. He can send money. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that." "Is that what you want?" Chinyere asked. "What I want doesn't matter anymore." "Amara, I have a human being growing inside me, Chi. Everything from here is about that, including you. You're still part of that." Amara stared at the tea. "I don't know if I can do his world. I don't know if I'm built for it." "What I know," Chinyere said carefully, "is that you've never run from anything in your life, not once, and I will not watch you start now." Jae-hyun called 47 times that Tuesday. She answered on the 48th. "Are you all right?" First thing, no preamble. "No." "Where are you?" "Safe, at Cheese." A long exhale on his end, the sound of a man who had been holding something in for several hours. "I'm sorry," he said. "This is my failure. This came from my world and landed on you, and that is..." His voice fractured slightly, the first time she'd heard it do that. "I will fix this. Jae-hyun will not—" "Jae-hyun," she stopped him. "What happens when you fix it? What does that look like? Because I need you to help me see past right now." Silence. Then, "I want you to come to Seoul." She hadn't expected that. "That's, hear me out." His voice was steady but urgent. "Not to hide you, not to control the situation. I want you to come because I want to stop doing this in fragments, managing from a distance, communicating in edges. I want to show you what I'm actually asking you to step into, with full transparency. If you see it and you decide to walk away, I will support you from a distance for the rest of my life and never argue with your choice." A pause. "But if you come and you decide to stay, I need you to know what you're choosing. You want me to walk into the lion's den. I want you to walk in as yourself," he said, "not as a secret, not as a scandal, as Amara Osei, and I want the world I run to see the difference." She was quiet for a very long time. "Your family will hate me," she said. "Some of them already do. That's not new information." "Jae-hyun, Amara." She pressed her free hand against her stomach, an instinct she'd developed without meaning to in recent weeks. She felt the faint, extraordinary knowledge of a life forming there. Her life, her choice. "Book the flight," she said. Seoul in October was gray and cold and immense, and nothing like she expected, which is to say it was exactly like every city she'd ever loved. Unknowable, until you found your first fixed point. Her fixed point was watching Jae-hyun walk through an airport like a man who owned the ground underneath it, and somehow still, when he saw her come through arrivals, get an expression on his face that made him look 20 years younger. He was with Sung-jin and 2 others. He crossed the space between them quickly, and for a moment she thought he might touch her face. His hand came up, but he stopped himself, checked himself, and instead said softly, "You came." "Don't make it weird," she said. He almost smiled. "Come, I'll take you somewhere warm." The Kim family compound was in Seongbuk-dong, a district of Seoul where old money had built walls high enough to grow their own weather. The main house was traditional in its bones and modern in everything added since, and it was enormous and beautiful, and when Amara arrived, full of people who had been briefed on her arrival and were reacting to it in very different ways. There was Jae-hyun's aunt, Mrs. Kim Soo-kyung, 72, the family's center of gravity, who had run the domestic side of Kim Enterprises for 4 decades and wore her authority like a second skeleton. She looked at Amara for a long time, said nothing, and then gestured to a seat beside her, which Amara later learned was not an insult, but an unprecedented sign of interest. There was Jae-won. She recognized him from the photographs Sung-jin had shown her. Thinner than Jae-hyun, sharper in a different way, with the particular energy of someone who has been calculating something for years. He looked at her the way you look at a problem you've almost solved, not with hatred, with assessment. "So," he said, in English that was more precise than accented, "you're the reason my brother has lost his mind." "Jae-won," Jae-hyun said, one word quiet, carrying a volume of warning. "I'm simply acknowledging reality." Jae-won spread his hands. "A child out of wedlock with a woman none of us know from—" "Say the next part carefully," Amara said. The room shifted. Jae-won looked at her with something that might, under different circumstances, have been surprise. "Excuse me?" he said. "I said," Amara continued, her voice absolutely even, "say the next part carefully, because I have traveled a long distance and I am tired, and I am not in the mood to pretend I can't hear the thing you're building toward." She met his gaze steadily. "I am Amara Osei. I am from Ghana and Nigeria. I have built my career with my own hands and I have never asked anyone for anything I didn't earn. Your brother's child is not a scandal. Your behavior is a scandal." Silence. Mrs. Kim Soo-kyung across the room made a sound. It took Amara a moment to identify it. It was a laugh. Brief, surprised, suppressed, but a laugh. Jae-won looked at his aunt, at Jae-hyun, back at Amara, and then, without another word, he left the room. Soo-kyung spoke to her alone that evening. They sat in a room that smelled like cedarwood and old books, and Soo-kyung poured tea with practiced, unhurried hands and said, "My family is not kind to outsiders. You should know this." "I assumed," Amara said. "My nephew," Soo-kyung continued, "has not brought a woman to this house in 9 years. Not since Jae-hyun, and that was different. She came because of strategy, not because he asked." She looked at Amara directly. "He asked you." "Yes." "Why do you think that is?" Amara considered this. "I think he's trying to do something differently than he has before." Soo-kyung was quiet then. "The child you carry, if it comes into this family, it will carry a weight. The Kim name is not light." "I know that." "Do you?" "Mrs. Kim." Amara set her tea down. "My father left when I was 9. I came to a foreign city at 22 with 40,000 naira in a suitcase. I have been carrying weight my entire life." She paused. "What your family offers is different weight, not lighter, just different." Another silence. Longer this time. "You're not afraid," Soo-kyung said. Not a question. "I'm terrified," Amara corrected. "There's a difference." For the second time that day, Mrs. Kim Soo-kyung made the sound that was almost a laugh. Jae-won didn't surrender quietly. 3 days after Amara arrived in Seoul, he moved. A full press release, his name attached this time, no hiding, delivered to every major Korean outlet and 3 international ones. It reframed the pregnancy story as evidence of Jae-hyun's unfitness to lead Kim Enterprises. It raised questions about the Lagos expansion. It mentioned Jae-hyun, obliquely but unmistakably, as evidence of a pattern of irresponsibility. And somewhere in the document, buried in the 3rd page, was a single line that changed everything. "Sources close to the family indicate that paternity of the current pregnancy has not been verified." Amara read this line at Jae-hyun's kitchen table at 7 in the morning while he was on a call in the next room. She read it twice, and then something cold and clear settled over her. The particular calm that comes not from the absence of emotion, but from the presence of absolute certainty. She stood up, walked to the door of the room where Jae-hyun was pacing with his phone, knocked once, and pushed it open. He looked up, read her face, said into the phone, "I'll call you back." "Your brother," she said, "has questioned paternity." She watched something move across his face, not surprise because he had known this might come, but anger, the kind that is worse for being slow. "I saw it," he said. "And?" He looked at her directly. His voice, when it came, was quiet and final. "I don't care if you hate me." She blinked. "What?" "Whatever you feel about this situation, about me, about my family, about everything, I need you to hear this." He crossed the room. He stopped close. "That is my baby inside you. I know it. You know it. And I don't need a press release or a test or my brother's permission to know what's true." His jaw was tight, his eyes absolutely steady. "Nobody questions my child. Nobody." The air between them was electric and trembling. "He made it public," she said. "Yes, which means I have to decide how I respond. You don't have to do anything. Jae-hyun." She stepped closer. "I am not a woman who lets other people tell my story. If we are doing this, if this is real, I am not hiding in this house while your brother dismantles who I am in the press." He looked at her for a long moment. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that it's time to stop being managed by you, by him, by anyone." She gave an interview, not to a Korean outlet, to a Lagos business journal, recorded on video, sent simultaneously to 3 international platforms. Chinyere helped her prepare it from halfway across the world. She sat in front of a camera in a borrowed room in Seoul, wearing her good blazer, her hair natural and full, and she told the truth. Not all of it. Not the parts that weren't hers to tell, but her part, who she was, what she'd built, how she'd arrived at this moment. She was not apologetic. She was not sensational. She was precise, and she was human, and she said simply that she was a woman who had made choices and was prepared to stand in them, and that anyone who wanted to define her by her association with a powerful man had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of her character. She did not mention Jae-hyun by name, once. She didn't need to. The context told the story. The interview was viewed 2 million times in 48 hours. The comments in 3 languages were not uniformly kind, but they were electric with the kind of conversation she had wanted to force into the open. Jae-hyun saw it. She knew, because Sung-jin told her, that he had watched it 3 times. She didn't know what to make of that until he asked to speak with her. They met without Jae-hyun. Her choice. She needed to know who Jae-hyun was when his brother wasn't in the room. He arrived at the coffee shop on time, she noted this, and he sat across from her without the architecture of contempt he'd worn at the compound. He looked, she thought, like a man who had been tired for a very long time. "You're not what I expected," he said. "People keep saying that," she replied. "I expected someone leveraging a pregnancy for access to the family." "I know. That's not what you're doing." "No," she agreed. "I'm not." He looked at the table, then up. "My brother is not a good man in every way that counts." "I know that, too," she said calmly. "I'm not pretending otherwise. But not good in every way is a description that fits most of the human race. It's not a disqualification." "He'll fail you." "Maybe. People often do." She met his gaze. "But I'd like to give him the chance to try, because the alternative is deciding his past is larger than his future, and I've never believed that about anyone." A long silence. "The press release was wrong," Jae-hyun said finally. The words came out like something dislodged at effort. "The paternity question was..." He stopped. It was wrong. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't quite enough. But it was the beginning of a sentence that hadn't existed before she walked into Seoul, and she decided, for now, that beginnings were worth something. She was 7 months pregnant when Jae-hyun met his son for the first time. She wasn't there. That was private, between him and Ji-yeon, and a small, confused little boy who looked at this tall stranger with his own face and didn't know what to do with what he saw. Jae-hyun told her about it afterward, sitting on the floor of the apartment he'd arranged for her in Mapo, back against the couch, voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. "He asked me if I liked robots," Jae-hyun said. Amara turned to look at him. "Ji-hoon." First thing he said. A pause. "He has a collection." I told him I'd never thought much about robots before. He said... Jae-hyun exhaled. He said, "That's okay. I'll teach you." The silence stretched. "Jae-hyun," she said gently. "I have 6 years to make up for," he said. "I don't know if that's possible." "You won't make up for them. That's not how it works." She shifted carefully. The baby was heavy now, always pressing, and reached out to touch his arm. "You start now, that's all. You just start now." He looked at her hand on his arm, then at her. "How are you this..." He seemed to search for the word. "Steady?" "I'm not," she said. "I'm steady in front of you. I fall apart in the shower when you're not watching." He almost laughed. Almost. "Stay," he said. Not dramatically, just directly. The way he asked for most things, without performance. "I know what I'm asking. I know the cost. Stay." She looked at this man who had disrupted every plan she'd ever made, who had brought her into a world she hadn't asked for and couldn't fully understand yet, who had a dead father's empire and a living son. He was only just learning how to reach, who told the truth when it was uncomfortable and kept his word in the small ways that mattered more than the large ones. She thought about her 5-year plan. She thought about color-coded calendars. She thought about 2 lines on a test and a bathroom floor in Lagos. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. Their daughter was born on a Thursday in February. She came into the world at 3:17 a.m. in a Seoul hospital, furious and vocal and absolutely certain she was the most important thing that had ever happened, which everyone in the room was prepared to confirm. Jae-hyun held her first. He stood by the window, the city still dark outside, the first suggestions of dawn at the edges. And he held his daughter like a man who had never held anything this fragile, which was true, and like a man who was not willing to do it imperfectly, which was also true. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, very quietly, without looking up from her face, "She has your nose." Amara, exhausted and undone and more fiercely happy than she had words for, said, "She better. Yours is too sharp." He looked up, and the expression on his face, in the gray-blue light of the almost dawn holding their daughter, was something Amara knew she would spend the rest of her life trying to find the right words for. She settled, finally, on, undone. Kim Jae-hyun, who ran an empire with a face like a sealed door, was completely, entirely undone. "What do we call her?" he asked. They had argued about this, gently, circularly, for 2 months. "Yuna," Amara said. "We call her Yuna." A Korean name, from a woman who had come from Ghana and Nigeria into a world she hadn't asked for and decided to make it hers. He looked at the baby. "Yuna," he said quietly, as if testing the weight of it. The baby made a sound that was not quite a protest and not quite an agreement, which Amara felt was exactly the correct response from a person who would, judging by her parentage, never do anything the expected way. "Yuna Kim Ose," Amara said. Jae-hyun looked up. "Kim Ose?" "Both. She belongs to both." He looked back at the baby, nodded once, the way he agreed to things that mattered with his whole body. "Kim Ose," he said. "Yes." 6 months later, Jae-won attended the naming ceremony. He sat at the back, arrived late, left early, and said nothing of note. But he came. And in a family that communicated primarily through power moves and strategic silences, coming was everything. Ji-yeon brought Ji-hoon to meet his half-sister. The children looked at each other with the solemn, mutual assessment of small people encountering someone who will share their world for the rest of their lives. Ji-hoon looked at Yuna for a long moment, then turned to Jae-hyun and said, "Does she like robots?" Jae-hyun, who had spent the past 6 months learning an extraordinary amount about robots, said, "She will." Ji-hoon nodded. "Then she can be in my robot club." It was the smallest thing. It was also, somehow, everything. Amara and Jae-hyun were not a perfect story. She needed to be clear about this. Always. In the version she would one day tell Yuna, in the version she held carefully in herself, in the understanding they built between them slowly and with significant friction, and the occasional episode of saying things that required apologizing for the next day. He was not always patient. She was not always soft. His world had edges that cut without warning, and she spent months learning which ones she could blunt and which ones she simply had to respect as structural. He had to learn, genuinely, painfully learn, that her independence was not a challenge to his authority, but the entire foundation of who she was, and that asking her to dim it would be the single fastest way to lose her. He learned. She stayed. The empire didn't disappear. The weight didn't lift. Lagos and Seoul remained a long flight apart, and the life they built was more complicated and less cinematic in its daily reality than the story of how it started. But some evenings, Lagos evenings, when she had flown home for work and he had rearranged 3 meetings to come with her, and they were sitting on the balcony of her old apartment that she'd refused to give up because some things you keep for yourself. Some evenings, the city glittered below them exactly the way it had on a rooftop 3 years before, and she would look at him in the Lagos light and think, I didn't plan this. I didn't plan any of this, and I would choose it 100 times over. He said it once, only once, and quietly, in the way he said all the things that mattered most. I don't regret a single thing that led me to that rooftop. She thought about 2 lines on a test, about a bathroom floor, about the moment her entire plan became something better and more terrifying than anything she'd planned for. Neither do I, she said. And the city hummed below them, alive and loud and indifferent, the way great cities always are, carrying millions of stories forward into the dark, not one of them arriving where it expected to, not one of them less than extraordinary for it. If this story moved you, share it. Someone needs to hear it today.